What's up guys? Ernest Langdon from Langdon Tactical here, and today we're going to talk about modern high capacity magazine design for handguns. So one of the common questions we get all the time is, why did Beretta not make the PX4 take the 92 magazine? I've got tons of magazines. That was stupid of Beretta to not keep the same magazine. Well, not really. There's a lot more details to that, and that's what we want to talk about. So to start with, when you start looking at modern service pistols, especially ones that were developed in the last 10 or 15 years, most of them were built from the ground up to be 40 caliber guns, not 9mm. So let's back up a little bit. The 92 basically was built around, or the magazine was built around, the Browning P35 high capacity magazine. As a matter of fact, most Wonder 9s, high capacity 9mm, were built around that magazine. The SIG 226, the CZ75, the Beretta 92, the list goes on and on. The reason for that is the optimum stack for a 9mm high capacity magazine. If you widen that stack, you lose reliability. So that's as wide as we can go and still have a reliable feeding magazine. Fast forward, 40 caliber comes along, and we can only get so many rounds of 40 caliber in that same stack. It's a larger bullet now in a P35 9mm stack. When we started designing new guns like the HK-USP series or the PX4 or the SIG 229, those guns were built to be 40 caliber guns from the ground up, and they went with a wider magazine tube. So the example I'm going to give you are these two 229 magazines. We've got a 40 caliber one and we've got a 9mm one, both for the 229. But if you look closely, you see the grooves up the side of the magazine. Here's another one for you, 40 caliber M&P magazine, M&P 9mm magazine. Same tubes fit in the same frame, but these grooves on the inside of the magazine or on the side of the magazine narrow that column back down to the P35 9mm stack, the same size stack as we see in the original 92 magazine. That's the reason your PX4 doesn't take a 9mm magazine. The other question comes into play is, how come this magazine holds 15 rounds and this magazine holds 17 rounds? They're basically identical in size. The reason for that is most of that is happening inside. They changed spring design and follower design to allow you to get more rounds in that same P35 Browning high power space. What I have here is two different springs and followers from two different magazines, almost identical tube sizes externally and fit in the same gun, both in a Beretta 92, but this is a 15 round magazine spring and follower, and this is an 18 round spring and follower. Standard 92 magazine, Mekgar 18 round magazine. The big differences happen in the way the spring is designed. The Mekgar magazine has what's called a nesting spring, meaning the spring is larger at the bottom and narrower at the top, and as it compresses, the narrow part of the spring goes down inside or nest inside the larger coils at the bottom, allowing you to have spring tension in a smaller compressed space. Whereas the 92 standard magazine is a straight coil, same diameter all the way up, and the follower acts as a guide rod for that spring when it compresses. And the standard 92 magazine also has a dimple in the bottom to further help guide that spring at the bottom. These are tremendously reliable magazines, but we're not going to get the capacity out of these that we do out of the more modern design magazines. The final thing that we want to touch on is what we see in a lot of magazines these days is the grooves in the side of them. Now, I mentioned earlier that those grooves could be to reduce the stack between 40 caliber and 9mm, but in this particular case, that's not the intention of these grooves. These grooves, this is a Beretta 92 Sand Mag. It's got a PVD finish with that groove on the side, makes for an ultimately reliable magazine, but the groove on this one is designed to increase reliability in dirty, sandy environments. What that means is, a lot of people think the bullets in a magazine just jump up as the magazine feeds, and that's actually not what happens. They actually kind of roll in the magazine as the follower pushes them up. They're rolling against the side, that flat side of the magazine, and if you get sand and grit in there, it causes that round to not want to continue to roll. When you put that sand groove there in the side, it allows that dirt and debris to fall down between the rounds and the body of the magazine, as well as reduce the surface area that the bullet is actually rotating on as it goes up. Some people think that the grooves in the sides of some of these modern pistols are designed to do that, and that's not really what they're there for. They provide that same feature, but the reason they're really there is to reduce the size of the box back down to that smaller 9mm size. So one of the questions we get is, when do I replace the magazine spring in my magazine? And it depends on the gun, but when it comes to 92s, and that's our area of expertise, when the slide stops locking to the rear all the time, that's probably when you need a new magazine spring. Before you make that decision though, make sure it's not you sticking your thumbs on top of the slide stop and causing the gun not to lock to the rear. But when that slide stops locking reliably to the rear, it's probably time to put a fresh magazine spring in there. The last question that we get a lot is, what type of magazine bottom should I put on my 92? And it depends on the magazine that you have. This gun's been around since the mid to late 70s, so there's been a lot of variations of magazine bottoms that are out there. The original 92 magazines that we saw in the military and early days of the 92 FS were actually a piece of solid aluminum. While they were good magazines or good bottoms, they didn't hold up as well when they got dropped repeatedly onto concrete. So they would eventually split and fail. Then the military went to this checkmate type magazine here, and in their infinite wisdom, they went with an all metal base plate to prevent that breakage. The bad news is there was two other major problems that would happen with this. One is the front of the magazine would bend up and then you couldn't seat it in the gun. And the second thing would happen is that metal plate would dent in the rear and you couldn't get the magazine bottom off of the gun, and it was almost impossible to clean the magazine. So it wasn't the best of both worlds. Neither one of them worked very well. Beretta kind of solved the problem. They came with a polymer overmolded magazine with steel inserts. So your new 92 magazines have steel inserts in a polymer magazine, and they seem to hold up the best of all the ones that I've tried. The newer 17 round factory magazines are also polymer base plates with inserts, but they're a little bit different. They're not gonna work, while they might fit, they're not gonna work correctly on an old standard 15 round magazine, because this magazine is just a little bit longer than the standard 92 magazine, and the base plate is thicker to fill up that gap for the additional length. So don't try to flip-flop those, they're gonna cause problems for you. And then finally, the Metgar magazine bottoms work extremely well on the Metgar magazines, and sometimes you can flip-flop, but they are a little bit thicker and they're probably not going to work correctly on your standard factory magazines, and vice versa. They're going to leave a gap when you put them on the Metgar magazines. So make sure you put the right bottoms on the right magazines, because that gap between the bottom of the frame and the magazine bottom is important. All right guys, so as you can see, we've got a long history when it comes to high capacity 9mm magazines and 40 caliber magazines, and that history is important and why a lot of you guys didn't get what you wanted, i.e. an old magazine design to go into a modern firearm. It's kind of hard to mix match the two. So guys, go out there, make sure you use the right magazines, high quality magazines in your gun, train hard, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. To keep up to date, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. For questions, go to langdontactical.com. And to keep up to date with all the new stuff from Langdon Tactical, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Langdon Tactical.